Hello and welcome to the Discover Dayton podcast, the podcast that's all about the Gem City's past, present, and future. I'm Rich Grieve and I'm your host, and today I'm excited to introduce you to someone who makes Dayton an awesome place to live, work, and play. Shayna McConville manages the Cultural Arts Division of Kettering City Government and oversees the Rosewood Arts Centre by day, but in her spare time she is an organizer of Dayton Pachakacha, which is a storytelling format used by people around the world to share their experiences. Join me as I talk with her and learn a bit more about Dayton PK. Hello, welcome to the show, and thanks for talking with me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So I invited you on today to talk about Dayton Pachakacha, but before we do that, perhaps you can talk a little bit about yourself, what you do, and maybe what your role is at Dayton PK.
Sure. My name is Shayna McConville, and I am originally from the area. Grew up in Yellow Springs, and like many of my classmates, moved away to pursue exciting things in other cities, but eventually came back. And I live in Dayton and moved back here in 2011. And I would say within a year of moving back, I was volunteering with the Dayton Pachakacha team of Jill Davis and Matt Sauer, two people who live in South Park, which is the neighborhood I live in. And Jill had originally started the PK chapter here in Dayton in 2009. So they were going strong 3 years in by the time I joined. Well, now I'm the last one standing. I'm working with a new team of people. Matt and Jill cycled off a couple of years ago and have been very fortunate to bring on some new organizers. We're all volunteers. This is definitely a project we feel passionately about, or I should say project/programming that we feel very strongly about.
Sure.
But Mike Bierbauer is one of our illustrious co-organizers. Katie Kelly and Ron Rollins just joined our team too, and
nice.
It's fun. We get together and chit-chat is what Pachakacha means in Japanese, but we chit-chat about our upcoming season. We have a handshake agreement with Tokyo headquarters, which is where Pachakacha started, and we are aiming to do 4 events each year. So we talk a lot about, where could we do it? Where can host, an audience our size? And then we more or less look for speakers who can fulfill the PK mission.
Awesome. Well, and you kind of preempted a little bit one of my next questions. I wanted to know if you could just maybe describe for people who don't know what is Pachakacha, and maybe we originated it, like you said, in Tokyo, Japan, but maybe how did it originate?
Yeah, it actually originated through 2 architects, Astrid Klein and Mark Dysom, and they are still in Tokyo doing their amazing architectural work and also overseeing Pachakacha, which has become an international phenomenon, I suppose is the correct word. There's over 1,000 cities who participate, every year in hosting Pachakacha events. It's very localized because of that, but also because of the connection to Tokyo and each other. There's definitely a sense of being a part of something much bigger.
Yeah, that's really cool.
And I realize I neglected to tell you that the format of Pachakacha is very important.
Right.
The architects, Astrid and Mark, realized that I think they were getting a little bit tired of long PowerPoint presentations. Mm-hmm. And the format they proposed was that each presenter would have 20 images, 20 slides, and the slides would be timed at 20 seconds for each slide, and it would automatically move forward to the next slide. So it really helps speakers, stay dynamic, keep talking, and the slides are important. We definitely have some guidelines that they need to be very visual. So it's not about, having a lot of text up there, like, your own script that you're speaking is not going to be up on the slide itself. Right. So there's a nice complement to, like, respecting visual culture, or representing, your ideas visually as well for the audience.
Yeah, and I mean, just as an audience member, I love the images are always really interesting, and so yeah, I love the format of it. How did it get from Japan all the way to Dayton, Ohio, though?
Well, that is a great question. I would say that our own Daytonian Jill Davis keeps up with what's going on, and I'm not sure what it was exactly that she saw. I suspect she had heard of it taking place in another city and looked into it, and it was, I think, a little bit before my time because I hadn't moved back to Dayton yet, but I think in the 2010s, the 2000s, there was a bit of interest in how to revitalize Dayton. And a lot of creative minds were getting together and talking about ways to bring community together and creatives and people who care about, making Dayton a thriving city in different ways. And I suspect that this came out of that sort of culture and that discussion that had been going on for a couple of years amongst a lot of doers and creatives in Dayton. That's
really cool. Well, I've been to many Dayton PKs. It's one of the things I loved about one of the reasons I moved here. Honestly, I loved going to them and doing other things here in Dayton. So I always have a great time. But for someone who's never been before, could you maybe talk a little bit about how the night typically works?
Sure. For those who haven't been before, we try to go into different spaces around Dayton. We've even gone beyond Dayton into surrounding communities. But we look for opportunities where maybe we are bringing people to a space for the first time. So, for example, we've hosted a PK in the Masonic Temple in Dayton, which is a really interesting historic building, and I think perhaps would be intimidating for someone to go in on their own independently to look around. We kind of look for those opportunities. We've been in warehouses that are being transformed into business spaces. We've been in hotel ballrooms. We've been in the Engineers Club, even movie theaters and churches. So that alone is sort of an interesting piece of the Pachakacha puzzle. And when someone is experiencing their first PK, I think what they will experience is a very warm and supportive audience. So they will be likely having a little bit of connection with the people they're sitting near and experiencing something together. We do always see a lot of new people at PKs. We're averaging generally between maybe 300 and 400 people an event. And typically, I would say we see almost half of an audience raise their hand when asked if this is their first PK. Each event is hosted by a local MC. Oftentimes it could be a past presenter, and they get to work with a script that we provide them to introduce each of the speakers, but they also can just sort of make it what they want it to be. I think the thing that makes PK special is that it is a DIY effort. We're not charging admission. We're not trying to make money off of this. This is completely volunteer and completely exists because the community wants it. When we have audiences this big, we know that there's a desire for these activities. And even during COVID, we had, hit pause, like pretty much everyone did. Right. But we did a couple online events too, which were really fun. But again, just coming back in person, I think was really meaningful to folks. We just did our first one back in person for 2022 a couple of weeks ago at the Dayton Art Institute, and had a great turnout. I would say over 300 people. So yeah, we're glad to be doing what we do, and glad that people like it.
Yeah, and I was at that one, and it was I loved that one. It was there was a lot of art in that one, and they're not though. Yeah. That's just kind of. Maybe does that just kind of happen, or because you guys don't really necessarily have themes for like the speakers per se, do you?
Yeah, not typically. We have done themed events in the past. We did one on collections when we were at the University of Dayton Library hosting one.
Oh, cool.
Thought it'd be kind of fun to focus on collections. And in the past, we've done topics like Hack Your City, which looked a lot at people that were kind of shaking things up in their own respects in the Dayton region in various different topics. So it depends. I think the spirit of PK is to look at storytelling and look at things that are inspiring or interesting, and there's such a wide range. Like, you can fit so many things under that umbrella of talks that we're looking for, that we do tend to have a wide range of things. Now, the Dayton Art Institute, I will admit, we do try to line up a lot more artists, and
sure.
Always feels like a good fit there for sure. But yeah, I would say artists are typically involved at least a little bit in each one.
Yeah, no, it's really cool. Well, one thing I love about going to PKs is that there are always adult beverages, but I've learned that's not necessarily an optional feature. Is beer really required for hosting an event?
Yeah, we strongly believe in the networking and the time that the audience gets to talk with each other. We have time before the event, and then we have an intermission, which we call a beer break. And yeah, I would say I don't think we've done a PK where alcohol has not been present. Typically we'll have the institution or organization handle that sort of thing, or we'll work with a bartender or something to make it possible. And that's good for the organizations because the money goes to them. So we really like, trying to pump a little money into the local economy if that's a possibility for sure. But I think a glass of wine or a beer doesn't hurt to kind of help you talk to some new folks.
No, not at all. I think it's helpful. The whole thing, there's typically maybe 8 speakers usually? Is that about right?
Yeah, typically about 8. We often aim for 8 as an ideal, and we actually often invite maybe 10 total, and undoubtedly people will drop out. It happens. And if it doesn't happen, we are very, very happy to have 10 speakers. But, for example, the Dayton Art Institute, we had 7, even though we had lined up a couple more, but life happens, so we get it. And again, this is supposed to be kind of a fun, a little bit of a DIY type of event, so we just kind of go with the flow.
Yeah, I know, that makes sense. Well, and I love too, if the interests are so varied, I think that you're not going to necessarily find every one of the talks interesting per se, but they're over in less than 7 minutes, and then you get to hear a new one. So
exactly,
I love that.
Yeah, and that's one of the best parts of it is I might be just so excited about a talk and say, well, that was clearly the best talk of the evening. And, someone I later run into was like, oh, I didn't really care for that one. I liked this one.
Mm-hmm.
So it is funny. It's very subjective.
Absolutely. Well, one thing we have in common, too, is that we've both delivered PK presentations before. How many have you done, and can you maybe tell people a little about what you talked about?
Sure. I've done 3. One voluntarily.
Okay.
And actually, when I had moved back to Dayton, it was, for family, and then also I had a job opportunity working with the city of Kettering at Rosewood Arts Centre. And I had been to a PK, I think maybe my first one was at the Neon Movies or something. And I was like, oh, this is great. Maybe I could talk about, something that's been really interesting to me, which is mid-century modern architecture and how Kettering is this perfectly preserved, example of, post-World War II architecture, America, all this stuff. So I did a PK focusing on Kettering architecture, and I'm not an architect, but, I was like, okay, this is fun, and it's giving me an opportunity to learn a little bit more and talk and take pictures of the things I see every day.
Oh, yeah.
And I think after we did that event, which actually did take place at Rosewood. And if you can imagine it, the crowds were small enough to fit in our theater, which seats about 150. Nowadays we couldn't fit a PK into our space.
Yeah.
But soon after I did that presentation, Matt and Jill had invited me to join them in helping organize. And I found quickly that the initiation into being a co-organizer is filling in when people drop out at the last minute.
Right.
So there are 2 additional presentations I gave where I had maybe a day or 2 to put it together.
Oh, wow.
And I did one on like strange museums that I've been to around the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other one was about bog snorkeling.
Yeah, I was hoping you would talk about that a little bit, because I don't think many people have heard about bog snorkeling.
Yeah, I don't know why. No, I'm just kidding. I will admit freely that it is a very small audience that participates in the worldwide bog snorkeling competition. It takes place in Wales each year, and I think they get about 200 to 300 people that will follow the rules, which basically are to put on some flippers and a snorkel and swim, I forget how many meters it is, but it is actually a little bit athletic, if you can believe it.
Yeah.
But you're swimming in a bog in dark waters off of a farm in Wales, and it's just a hoot. Like, the whole town comes out to watch it, and people dress up in funny costumes. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous, and it's so much fun.
That's really cool. I remember seeing that, and I was like, wow, I never heard of that, but it seems like a cool experience. So, and that's the great thing about Pachakacha, is you get to hear about all these crazy things around the world. So,
yeah, it's true. And what about you, Arch? What did you speak on?
Oh, I talked about my trip to the first time that I went to Bosnia and Herzegovina as part of the Dayton Sister City Committee, and I just talked about the trip there and everything, and it was really great because I was able to kind of find and connect with some people here in Dayton that were interested in, kind of building on that connection, I guess, and we were able to start an exchange program after that. And I was working at the school at the time, and so I was doing it. It was a school-based one, and then I moved. I started working for the city, and we got a grant through the U.S. Department of State to bring over like 18 students and 3 teachers, and so that kind of helped propel that whole thing, and kind of motivated me to want to, do more with it. So it was really cool. So.
That's fantastic. I love hearing that, too, that you were able to connect with some new people, too, after giving the talk. I think that's sort of one of those indirect outcomes of presenting, is people suddenly are interested and aware of who you are and what you're doing, or something that you shared. And we see that a lot, and that in itself is probably why also this is such a popular event. I think people really like connecting with each other, and sometimes that's hard to do if you're not, going to a lot of events that, aren't promoting that sort of networking. Like, this is informal networking, so it doesn't feel like stiff and professional. It's just more laid back and fun. Yeah, no,
I've met quite a few people that I would consider friends now, that just through Pachakacha, so it's great.
That's great.
Awesome. Are there any presentations that you've seen that have really stuck with you over the years, or any favorites you've had?
Oh, gosh, I have so many.
I'm sure it's hard to narrow down.
I was like, now I'm the senior member of our organizing team, so I've seen a lot of presentations.
Oh, sure.
One of my favorites was back in, I almost want to say it was in 2014, and we were in the IUE CWA Union Hall, downtown Dayton, and we had a great lineup of presenters, but there was an artist, Ben Riddleberger, who no longer lives in Dayton, sadly for us, but at the time was a very active artist, and he gave this talk that still to this day is absolutely one of my favorites, and he had artwork sort of playing behind him as the 20 slides that are advancing every 20 seconds, but just sort of did this really powerful, maybe a little bit of a stream of consciousness about how art impacted his life and his mental health. And it was just so strong and so interesting, and his work really spoke for itself, and really you could kind of understand the work a little bit better hearing his experiences. We've had someone, a couple years ago too, who gave a presentation about fermentation, which is very interesting. I mean, the person delivering the presentation clearly was passionate about what they were learning in their fermenting journey. So, things like that, it can be fun. And then, sometimes people just totally surprise you. We have, and, I'm an artist myself, so I tend to remember a lot of the artist talks, but Loranna Wong, an artist who helped start the sideshow in Dayton, which takes place every year, minus COVID years. She did a really interesting PK where she sort of flipped the script a little bit. So she actually had her slides up, and the slides were giving directions to the audience, and she arrives, as it starts, in the back of the room instead of up in front, like where you typically would be in front of the slides presenting. And she's blindfolded, and the slides are trying to help encourage the audience to participate and engage with her and bring her sort of up to the front stage. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is so wild. How can anyone do this? And it was funny to also watch because people were terrified to actually participate. So she kind of stumbled along blindly, and finally someone was like, oh, okay, I think I get what's happening. And got up and helped her. But I mean, just that was a very experimental performance. And she's a performance artist, so it was fun to see that one too.
That's really cool. So if someone's, listening and they feel like they have something that they might want to share at a PK, what advice would you give would-be presenters first, and then how could they actually go about, trying to submit their idea for get a slot at the next PK?
Yeah, we definitely love to hear what our community wants to share, and we look for people who can share presentations, who maybe don't have experience public speaking or are old pros at it. So it's really a wide range. We have a couple perimeters around the event because of our handshake agreement to be a Pachakacha city. So they can't be political. They can't be sales pitches for an organization or something like that, marketing. But what we find is that when people sort of think more deeply about, maybe they're like, oh, I really want to talk about this really cool business I started or whatever, we might say, you're not completely out of here. Think a little bit more about how you got to this place, or, some sort of story or moment that, changed everything for you. Those are really great experiences that can be shared. I generally say whatever you feel passionate about tends to be a good PK. And I think that is absolutely true. I will say sometimes people just want to brainstorm some ideas. I typically am trying to put myself in an audience member's shoes and say, okay, which one would be the most unusual for our audience to learn about, because you never know. You never know. And then sometimes we have people who are lined up who were like, well, they're going to definitely talk about this. This is, what I know they're passionate about, and they'll do something completely different. And it's always sort of a fun surprise when that happens too. So yeah, I mean, again, we don't ask people to do their presentation for us ahead of time so we can give them any feedback or change anything. We just have to kind of go with it. And we do review the slides ahead of time. Those do have to get submitted a couple days before the presentation. And typically the slides are very powerful and usually show a lot about that presentation itself and how it will connect with the audience. So we really appreciate that visual aspect, like I mentioned earlier, too. And again, it's only 6 minutes and 40 seconds. So if it's someone's first time presenting, like, it is over so fast. And we hear that over and over again. Like, oh, I thought I had more time. Like, this just went by so fast.
Yep. I know I practiced for mine many times, and I had to cut lots of things out of it because I was going too long.
Yes.
So I would definitely encourage everybody to run through it at least a few times before they try it up on stage.
Yeah, definitely a good rule of thumb. Some people are, like, brilliant at just improvising. I am not one of those people. So,
Me
like
either.
you, I will, like, write it out and practice it and then make edits and stuff.
Yeah.
But usually it's not enough. I'll be, like, behind immediately as the slides advance. Be like, okay, I'm throwing this script out the window, never mind.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah.
Well, you've talked about the PK team that you have volunteers already a little bit, but could you talk about, what all goes into planning one of these events? What all do you guys have to do?
So a lot of what we do, we are a team that works very closely together, and we don't really make decisions without input from the other teammates. But we do each sort of have something that we bring to the table that helps us succeed with each event. Mike Bierbauer, I mentioned earlier, he is a genius when it comes to technology. And funny enough, he is the one who shines behind the scenes on the night of the event, where, usually the other folks, Katie, myself, Ron, we've done so much of the work ahead of time that, we're still working during the event, of course, but we can also sit back and watch, because Mike's running the slides. He's got this figured out,
Gotcha.
He's the one talking to the sound person or whoever technology specialists might be involved, depending on the venue. Sometimes in the past, we just had to rent equipment and hope for the best. But actually, we've been partnering with Liftoff Entertainment, and they have been awesome at getting the technology stuff figured out for us.
Oh, great.
So we are definitely getting better and better each time. Katie Kelly does a lot of the marketing, which is definitely her strength, and she runs the social media posts and comments and all that fun stuff. And then between her and myself, we tend to be the ones responding to most of the emails that come in, just general inquiries or any sort of correspondence that relates. And then in terms of putting a speaker list together, we do get a lot of unsolicited speaker proposals, which is great. And then we also do reach out to people that we think would make a really great presentation happen. And we do that as a team, but I think that falls a little bit more on myself and on Ron Rollins as well, who is our most recent member. And we only do that with the input of the whole team there, but, we tend to do a little bit more of the outreach to talk to people. Gotcha.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah.
So if people have missed an event, or, they're just hearing about it now and they really want to learn about, bog snorkeling, how can they go back and see presentations that have already happened, in the past?
Yeah, we are a part of the International PK website, so people can actually hop on to Pachakacha.com, which hopefully people know how to spell that. I'm just kidding. No one probably knows how to spell that. But PK, if you type in PK presentations, typically you'll end up at the Pachakacha website. And that's where we actually upload all the presentations from our past events. And I think we have events on there that go back as far as probably 2012 or so, maybe even earlier than that. And you can really get a sense of just the incredible people that live in our community through, the hundreds and hundreds of presentations that we've been able to share over the past, oh boy, it's been a while, over 10 years, really, over a decade. So, yeah, the box snorkeling one's up there, so is yours, Arch. So, and the fun part is you can go on and hear yourself, and maybe sometimes that's not so fun.
No, I think
you're
so.
like, oh, why did that happen,
Exactly.
Yeah, it's great. So we really enjoy it, and making these ideas available to the international PK community.
Awesome. Well, what's the best way to make sure that you stay up to date on when future PKs are going to be held in Dayton?
Typically, we update the website and our social media as soon as we know. So the Pachakacha.com website has a page dedicated to Dayton, and that's almost the first place we're going to put an event up on our Dayton page. And that's also where we typically will list who the speakers are for that event ahead of time. So anyone who's just like anxious to know what's going to happen, that might be the best place to start. And then, like I mentioned, Katie does our social media, so we're active on Instagram and Facebook, and there is a mailing list too, an email list, and people can sign up for it just, I think, by emailing us at our Gmail account. We're at pkdayton@gmail.com.
Okay.
And we'll get people added, but we usually send out one or two emails about each event.
Now, is that the same email that they would reach out to if they wanted to submit an idea for a presentation?
Absolutely.
Okay, awesome. Well, thanks so much for talking with me today and for putting on these events in Dayton. I know I speak for a lot of people when I say thank you and your team for all that you do.
Well, thank you so much for being a part of it, both as a participant and as an audience member. And it's been fun talking with you.
Yeah, you too. Thanks so much. All right, well, that was my interview with Shayna McConville, one of the organizers behind Dayton Pachakacha. If that sounded like something you'd like to check out, be sure to visit their website at pachakacha.com/cities/Dayton and sign up for their mailing list at pkdayton@gmail.com. That's it for today's episode, but please be sure to subscribe and give the show a rating and follow us on social media as well. To get in touch, email us at discoverdaytonpodcast@gmail.com or fill out the form on our website at discoverdaytonpodcast.com. Thanks for listening, and until next time, stay funky, Dayton.